Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been running the I-94 corridor through North Dakota for 17 years, and I learned early that the prairie doesn't forgive mistakes. That February afternoon in 2019, I knew the storm was coming before the Weather Service even issued the warning. You can see it in the sky out here, the way the western horizon turns the color of an old bruise, the way the wind shifts and starts testing your trailer for weak spots. I was hauling refrigerated pharmaceuticals from Fargo to Billings, and my dispatcher had already called twice asking if I wanted to hold over. I should have said yes, but the load was time-sensitive, the rate was good, and I'd driven through worse. Or so I told myself. Asa Whitlock doesn't leave money on the table, and he sure as hell doesn't let a little snow dictate his schedule. That kind of thinking has kept me employed for nearly 2 decades. It's also the kind of thinking that almost killed me that night. The first flakes started falling around Jamestown, light and lazy, the kind that drivers from the coasts think is pretty. Out here, we know better. Those innocent flakes are scouts. The real army is behind them, and when it arrives, it doesn't take prisoners. By the time I hit the stretch between Valley City and Oriska, the wind had picked up to the point where my trailer was catching it like a sail. I could feel the whole rig wanting to drift, that sickening sensation of 53 feet of steel deciding it might prefer the ditch to the road. The snow was coming down harder now, not falling, but driving horizontally across the interstate. My wipers were working overtime, and I'd already knocked the cruise control off, dropping down to 45, then 40. The world outside my windshield was turning into that special kind of North Dakota hell we call a whiteout, where the sky, the ground, and everything between them becomes the same shade of white, where depth perception goes out the window and you're driving on faith alone. The CB had been quiet for the last 20 minutes, which wasn't a good sign. Usually, you'd have drivers checking in, asking about conditions ahead, warning each other about black ice or accidents. Silence meant either everyone had already pulled off, or they were too busy keeping their rigs on the road to talk. I was about to key up and ask if anyone was out there when I saw the flashers. Red and blue strobes cutting through the white, maybe half a mile ahead. I eased off the throttle and let the Jake brake do its work, feeling the rig slow without risking a skid. As I got closer, I could make out a highway patrol cruiser angled across the right lane, and behind it, what looked like a jackknifed semi blocking both lanes. I brought my rig to a stop about 100 yards back and grabbed my parka. The wind hit me like a physical thing when I opened the door, stealing my breath and driving snow into every gap in my clothing. I could barely see the patrol car through the horizontal snow, but I made my way forward, one hand on my trailer to keep my bearings. That's when I met Lowell Breck for the first time. He was standing behind his cruiser, and I could tell right away he was in over his head. Not his fault. Nobody trains you for conditions like this. He looked young, maybe late 20s, and his face had that particular shade of worry that comes from realizing the situation is bigger than your ability to handle it. "You need to turn around," he shouted over the wind. "Interstate's closed. Pile up ahead. 3 trucks, 2 cars. 1 fatality already." I looked past him at the jackknifed rig. The trailer was at a perfect 90-degree angle to the cab, completely blocking both lanes. "Can't turn around," I shouted back. "Shoulder's too soft and I've got 53 feet of trailer. I'll end up stuck or worse." He knew I was right. You could see it in his eyes. "Tow truck's coming," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. How long? Dispatch said 45 minutes. That was 30 minutes ago. We stood there in the howling wind, both of us knowing that 45 minutes in a blizzard might as well be forever. The visibility was down to maybe 20 feet now, and even Breck's cruiser was starting to look like a ghost. That's when we heard it, the deep rumble of a big diesel engine coming from the direction I'd just driven. We both turned, and through the white I could see headlights, high-mounted, the kind you see on a heavy wrecker. The tow truck had made better time than expected, or maybe dispatch had sent them earlier than Breck knew. Either way, I felt a small measure of relief. The wrecker pulled up behind my rig, and the driver climbed down. He was a big man, made bigger by layers of winter clothing, moving with the kind of deliberate care that comes from working in conditions that can kill you if you slip up. When he got close enough for me to see his face, I understood why he moved that way. He had to be 70 if he was a day, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same bedrock as the prairie itself. "Obadiah Krantz," he said, extending a hand in a heavy work glove. "Heard you folks needed some help." Breck explained the situation. The jackknifed rig, the pile-up ahead, the closure. Krantz just nodded like he'd seen it all before. Probably had. "I'll get that trailer straightened out," he said. "But you two need to get people back. Way back. If that kingpin's damaged or the fifth wheel's compromised, this whole thing could shift when I put tension on it." It was sound advice, and Breck immediately headed back to his cruiser to radio for any other emergency vehicles to hold their distance. I stayed with Krantz as he walked up to assess the jackknifed truck. That's when things started feeling wrong. The truck itself looked abandoned. No lights, no sign of the driver. The cab door was open, swinging slightly in the wind, and snow had already started to pile up on the driver's seat. "Driver must have walked forward to check on the pile-up," I said, but Krantz didn't respond. He was looking at something on the ground, and when I followed his gaze, I saw it too. Dark spots in the snow, leading away from the cab toward the shoulder. Not footprints. The wind had already erased those. These were different, larger, irregular, and they were red. "Blood," Krantz said, his voice flat. "Fresh enough that the snow hasn't covered it yet." We followed the trail with our eyes, watching it disappear into the whiteout on the shoulder side. Breck had come back by then, and when we showed him, his face went even paler than the cold had already made it. "Could be from the accident," he said, but he didn't sound like he believed it. "Could be," Krantz agreed. "But this truck jackknifed clean. No impact damage I can see. And that blood trail's leading away, not toward the pile-up." The three of us stood there, and I could feel the situation changing, transforming from a simple road closure into something else, something worse. Breck got on his radio calling for medical and requesting backup, but the response wasn't good. The storm had spawned multiple accidents across 3 counties, and resources were stretched beyond thin. We were on our own. "I need to check the pile-up," Breck said. "See if anyone's hurt up there, if anyone's seen this driver." He looked at me. "You stay here with your rig. Don't let anyone else come up." Then he looked at Krantz. "You think you can get this trailer moved?" Krantz studied the jackknifed rig for a long moment. "I can move it," he said. "Question is whether I should. If that driver's hurt and wandered off, we might need this as a landmark. In this whiteout, it's the only thing visible from both directions." He had a point, but Breck shook his head. "We've got 24 vehicles backed up and more coming. If we don't clear this, we're going to have another pile-up right here. Move it to the shoulder at least." Krantz nodded slowly and headed back to his wrecker. I watched Breck disappear into the white, heading toward the pile-up he'd mentioned. The storm was getting worse, if that was even possible. The wind was hitting sustained speeds that made standing upright a challenge, and the temperature was dropping fast. I could feel it even through my layers, that bone-deep cold that the prairie is famous for, the kind that finds every gap, every weakness. I made my way back to my rig and climbed into the cab, grateful for the residual warmth. Through my mirror, I could see Krantz working, his wrecker's yellow strobes creating weird shadows in the blowing snow. That's when I noticed my CB was crackling. Not with voices, with something else, a rhythmic pattern, almost like Morse code, but irregular. I turned up the volume and listened. Click, pause, click, click, pause, click. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. Then started again, different pattern this time. I grabbed the mic. Anyone transmitting on channel 19, identify yourself. Nothing, just the clicking, then breaking through a voice. Low, distorted, barely audible. Help, can't find, so cold. It cut out. I keyed up again. This is the rig at the closure. Identify your location. Are you the driver from the jackknifed truck? More clicking. Then silence. I climbed back down and made my way to where Krantz was hooking up to the jackknifed trailer. The blood trail was still visible, darker now against the fresh snow, leading off into nothingness. You hear that CB transmission? I asked. He shook his head. Radio's been dead since I got here. Storm's probably playing hell with everything. But I'd heard it, crystal clear, despite the storm. Someone's out there, I said. The driver, maybe. They're calling for help. Krantz stopped what he was doing and looked at me. Really looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You sure about what you heard? Positive. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded toward the blood trail. You want to follow that? Be my guest. But I'm telling you right now, in this storm, once you lose sight of these lights, you're done. You won't find your way back. The wind'll turn you around, the cold'll slow you down, and the white'll swallow you whole. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was just stating facts, the way you might tell someone that fire burns or water's wet. What about Breck? I asked. He's been gone a while. 10 minutes in a whiteout feels like an hour, Krantz said. He'll be back, or he won't. The casual way he said it chilled me more than the wind. I made a decision. I'm going to try the CB again. If I can get a response, maybe I can talk them back here. Krantz shrugged and returned to his work. I climbed back into my cab and grabbed the mic. Unknown driver, this is Asa Whitlock at the closure. If you can hear me, key your mic twice. I waited, nothing, then 2 distinct clicks. My heart jumped. Okay, good. I need you to head toward the flashing lights. Red and blue from the patrol car, yellow from the wrecker. Can you see any lights? A long pause. Then that voice again, clearer this time but wrong somehow. The cadence was off, the words spaced too far apart. Lights, yes, but they're moving. Circling. They're not moving, I said. The snow's playing tricks. The lights are stationary. Walk toward them. Can't. Too cold. Legs won't. The voice faded. I tried again. How far out do you think you are? Are you on the shoulder? In the median? No response. Just that clicking again. And then something else. A sound like wind, but underneath it, something that might have been breathing. Heavy. Labored. I was about to try again when my door jerked open. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but it was just Breck, covered in snow, looking haggard. Pile-up's bad, he said, climbing up into the passenger seat. 2 fatalities now. 3 people transported before the ambulance got stuck. Everyone else is sheltering in vehicles. No one's seen our missing driver. I told him about the CB transmission. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. You sure you didn't just hear another driver further back? No, I said. They said they could see the lights. They're close. Breck pulled out his radio and tried to coordinate, but the response was breaking up, full of static. When he put it down, his expression was grim. Command says there's no one else on scene who's unaccounted for. The driver of that jackknifed truck, they found his wallet in the cab. Name was Marcus Freeling. They're running it now, but... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. But what? Dispatch says a Marcus Freeling was reported missing 3 weeks ago, down in Iowa. Truck was found abandoned on a county road. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop 20 degrees. That's impossible, I said. This truck jackknifed tonight. We saw it happen. Well, we saw the result. Breck nodded, but he looked sick. I know. I'm just telling you what they said. Could be a coincidence. Common name, maybe. But his voice said he didn't believe that any more than I did. We sat there in silence, listening to the wind howl. Then the CB crackled again. This time, Breck heard it too. So cold. Can't feel. That's him, I said. Breck grabbed the mic before I could. This is Highway Patrol. State your location. Are you injured? The response was immediate. Yes. Hurt. Need help. Please. But the voice was different, higher. Almost like it was trying to match Breck's cadence. Something's wrong, I said. Breck shot me a look, but he must have felt it too because he put the mic down. We watched through the windshield as Krantz continued working on the jackknifed trailer. The blood trail was still there, darker against the white. And as I watched, I realized something that made my skin crawl. It wasn't being covered by fresh snow. Everything else was. The road, the vehicles, every surface, but that blood trail remained visible, as if the snow was falling around it, but not on it. Breck, I said quietly, look at the blood. He saw it too. I watched his hand move to his service weapon, unbuttoning the holster. Stay in the cab, he said, opening the door. I'm going to check something. He dropped down into the storm, and I watched him approach the blood trail. He crouched down, examining it, then stood up quickly and backed away. He said something, but the wind took his words. Then he was moving quickly back to the cruiser, and I saw him pop the trunk. When he came back into view, he was carrying a flare. He struck it, the red light blazing even in the whiteout, and threw it onto the blood trail. For a second, nothing happened. Then the snow around the flare began to move. Not melting, moving, crawling away from the heat in patterns that weren't random, that suggested intention. Breck stumbled backward, and I saw his mouth moving, probably calling it in on his radio. That's when the clicking on the CB started again, but this time it was faster, more urgent. And underneath it, I could hear that breathing again, close now, like it was right outside my door. I turned to look at the passenger window and saw a hand pressed against the glass. Palm flat, fingers spread. But the hand was wrong. The skin was gray, the fingers too long. And when I looked closer, I could see that what I'd taken for skin was actually something else. Something that looked like it was made of compacted snow and ice, and something darker. Something organic. The hand slid down the glass, leaving a smear that wasn't quite blood and wasn't quite water. I did the only thing I could think of. I fired up the engine, threw it in gear, and started backing up. The hand vanished. Through my mirror, I could see Breck running toward his cruiser and Krantz abandoning the wrecker to do the same. I kept backing up until I was a good 100 yards from the jackknifed truck, then stopped. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The CB crackled one more time. Why? Did you leave? The voice was petulant now, almost childlike. We were just getting acquainted. Then it laughed. It was the worst sound I've ever heard, like wind whistling through a cracked window mixed with something wet and organic. Breck's cruiser pulled up beside me, and he rolled down his window. "Follow me," he shouted. "We're getting out of here. They can close the whole damn interstate for all I care." I didn't argue. Krantz's wrecker fell in behind us and we started driving. Not toward the pile-up. Breck was leading us onto the shoulder, then through a gap in the median, heading back west. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal in these conditions, but staying felt worse. We drove for what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, none of us speaking on the radio, just maintaining visual contact through the whiteout. Finally, we saw lights ahead. A truck stop, its neon sign barely visible through the snow. We pulled in together, parking our rigs in a tight cluster near the entrance. Inside, over coffee that tasted like diesel and salvation, we didn't talk about it at first. Just sat there, letting the warmth seep back into our bones. Finally, Krantz spoke. 30 years I've been pulling vehicles out of ditches in this state, he said. Seen things you can't explain. The prairie's old, older than the roads, older than us. Sometimes, in the worst storms, when the white gets so thick you can't tell up from down, something else comes out. Something that was here before us and will be here after. Breck was pale. Command's going to want a report. Tell them the storm made it impossible to clear the scene, Krantz said. Tell them you made a judgment call. They'll understand. He looked at me. And you heard that CB transmission. We all did. But maybe tomorrow, in the light, you'll remember it differently. Maybe it was just static. Maybe you were tired. I wanted to argue, to insist on the truth, but when I opened my mouth, I realized he was right. What was the truth? That something had worn a dead man's voice like a coat? That blood moved with intention in the snow? That a hand made of winter itself had touched my window? Who would believe it? Who should believe it? Yeah, I said finally. Maybe it was just static. We stayed at that truck stop until morning. When the sun came up and the storm had passed, the interstate was cleared by crews who found nothing unusual at the closure site. No jackknifed truck, no blood trail. The only evidence anything had happened was the pile-up, which was explained easily enough by the conditions. But I know what I saw, what we all saw. I still run the I-94 corridor, still haul loads through North Dakota in winter. But I don't stop anymore when I see abandoned vehicles in a storm. I don't answer CB calls from voices I don't recognize. And when the snow starts falling so thick that the world turns white, I find a truck stop, park it in, and wait for morning. Because Krantz was right. The prairie's old, and in the worst storms, something else comes out. Something that knows the sound of your voice before you speak. Something that can make blood crawl through snow. Something that's patient and cold and always, always hungry. Last month I heard about a driver who disappeared on that same stretch during a blizzard. They found his truck idling on the shoulder, door open, no sign of him. The CB was on, transmitting nothing but clicking sounds and, underneath it, breathing. They're still looking for him. I hope they never find what he found instead. The lake effect snow up in Minnesota's Iron Range doesn't mess around. It comes off Superior like something alive, turns the sky into a gray wall, and dumps snow measured in feet, not inches. I learned that the hard way in January of 2017, running a load of mining equipment parts up to Eli. The forecast called for 6 to 8 inches. We got 36. I've driven through plenty of winter storms, but what happened that night taught me there are worse things than bad weather. Sometimes the weather just reveals what was already waiting. My name's Hiram Keating, and I've been hauling freight for 22 years. Started young, stayed at it, made a decent living. I'm not the kind of driver who looks for trouble or tells wild stories at the truck stop. I run my logs clean, keep my rig maintained, and mind my own business. But that night north of Virginia, Minnesota, minding my own business wasn't an option. The storm caught me between towns on a 2-lane county road because the main highway was already closed. My GPS and every trucker app I had said this route was still open. They were wrong. The snow started coming down heavier around 9 p.m., and by 10 p.m., I was down to 20 miles an hour with my 4-ways on. The road was disappearing under a white blanket, and I was navigating by feel as much as sight, following the ghostly outline of trees on either side. Then I saw the plow. It was pulled off on the shoulder, yellow strobes cutting through the snow, and a figure standing beside it waving a flashlight. I brought my rig to a crawl and stopped, leaving it in gear with my foot on the brake. The figure approached my driver's side, and I rolled down the window. "Road's closed ahead," the man shouted over the wind. He was built like a fire hydrant, short, solid, with a face weathered by decades of northern Minnesota winters. Snowdrifts completely blocking both lanes about 2 miles up. "I'm Torvald Hume, county plow foreman. You need to turn around." I looked in my mirrors. The road behind me was already filling in with fresh snow, and my tracks were disappearing in real time. "Can't turn this rig around here," I said. "Shoulder's too narrow, and I don't know what's under all this snow. Ditch could be 2 feet away or 6 inches. Torvald nodded like he'd expected that answer. "There's a pull-off about a 1/4 mile back. Old Forest Service access road. You can turn around there, or at least get off the main road until this passes." He pointed his flashlight back the way I'd come, but all I could see was white. I didn't see any pull-off. "It's there, easy to miss in this. Look for a gap in the tree line on your left. There'll be a gate, but it's not locked, just chain with a loop." He stepped back from my door. "Don't try to push through that drift. I've got a crew coming to clear it, but they're 2 hours out. Maybe more in this." I thanked him and started backing up, careful not to let my trailer drift. The wind was pushing hard from the northeast, the worst angle for a high-profile load. I crept backward, watching my mirrors, looking for that gap in the trees. And there it was, just like he said, a break in the solid wall of pine and birch. I could barely make out the gate in my headlights, just a wooden barrier with a chain hanging loose. I pulled forward enough to line up, then backed in, feeling my trailer tires leave pavement for gravel, then snow. When I was clear of the main road, I set my brakes and killed the engine. The silence after the engine died was profound. Just wind and snow, the white noise of a blizzard. I should have felt relieved to be off the road, but something about this place felt wrong. The trees were too close, pressing in on both sides of the narrow access road. In my headlights, I could see the lane continued back into darkness, disappearing into the forest. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down to check my surroundings. The cold hit me like a hammer. Had to be 20 below before wind chill. The snow was already past my ankles and more was coming down so thick I could barely see my own trailer. That's when I noticed the building. It was set back from the access road maybe 50 yards into the trees. Dark, barely visible except for its square shape against the forest. Some kind of maintenance shed or ranger station, probably abandoned. I was about to climb back in my cab when I saw the light. Just a flicker in one of the windows, there and gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. I stood there in the snow, wind cutting through my layers, staring at that dark building. The light flickered again, longer this time, definitely coming from inside. My first thought was that someone else had taken shelter there. Maybe another stranded driver, or a hunter caught out in the storm. The decent thing would be to check. maybe share resources if they needed help. But something held me back. Some instinct that lives deeper than thought. I was still standing there debating when I heard the sound. A low, metallic scraping, rhythmic, coming from the direction of the building. It stopped, started again, stopped, like something being dragged across a concrete floor. I clicked on my flashlight and pointed it at the building. The beam barely penetrated the snowfall, but I could see the door was hanging open. I made a decision I'm still not sure was right. I walked towards the building, snow crunching under my boots, flashlight beam dancing. The metallic scraping had stopped, but as I got closer, I could hear something else. A low humming, almost musical, rising and falling in pitch. I reached the door and shone my light inside. It was a ranger station, just like I'd thought. Or it had been. The interior was trashed. Overturned furniture, papers scattered, a filing cabinet lying on its side, and in the center of the room, a kerosene heater glowing orange, explaining the light I'd seen. But there was something wrong about it. The heater was old, ancient even, and it was sitting in a pool of melted snow that should have put it out. The humming was coming from it, or near it, a resonant sound that made my teeth ache. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the snow-thick air. No response. I stepped inside, sweeping my light across the room. That's when I saw the marks on the floor. Deep gouges in the concrete, long parallel lines that started at the door and led to where the heater sat. Like something heavy had been dragged. The gouges were fresh. I could see where they'd scraped through dust and dirt to expose clean concrete underneath. And at the end of each gouge, small, dark spots. I crouched down, knowing what they were before I touched one. Blood. Still tacky. I stood up fast, my hand instinctively moving to the hunting knife on my belt. "I'm armed," I called out. "If someone's hurt, I can help. If you're trying to—" I didn't get to finish. The humming from the heater suddenly rose in pitch, became almost a shriek, and then cut out completely. The orange glow flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness except for my flashlight. And in that darkness, I heard breathing, not mine, coming from the corner behind the overturned filing cabinet. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I swung my light toward the sound. For just a second, I saw a shape, low to the ground, hunched, with something wrong about its proportions. Then it moved incredibly fast, scuttling behind the filing cabinet with a sound like claws on concrete. My light found nothing but empty space and those terrible gouges on the floor. I backed toward the door, keeping my light trained on the corner. "Stay back," I said, hating how my voice shook. "I'm leaving. Just stay back." The breathing continued, steady and wet. Then, from the darkness, a voice. "Cold out there." It was a man's voice, but wrong. The words were slurred, like a mouth full of something. "You should stay. Warm in here." I was out the door before I knew I was moving, running through knee-deep snow back to my rig. I didn't look back, didn't want to see if anything was following. I reached my cab, yanked the door open and climbed in, slamming it behind me. I fired up the engine immediately, not caring about warm-up time or proper procedure. I needed to move. But when I threw it in gear and hit the gas, I felt the wheels spin uselessly. I'd sunk too deep in the snow and my drive tires couldn't find purchase. I was stuck. I grabbed my CB and keyed the mic. "Anyone on 19, this is a stuck rig on County Road." I didn't even know what road I was on. "North of Virginia, Old Forest Service Access Road. I need a pull now." Static. I switched channels, tried again. Nothing. The storm was blocking everything. I was about to try my cell phone when I saw movement in my mirror. A figure coming from the direction of the ranger station walking with an odd, limping gait. As it got closer, I could make out more details. It was a man, or had been. He was wearing what looked like an old park ranger uniform, but it was torn and stained. His face, I couldn't look at his face for long. There was something wrong with it. Something that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing. He reached my passenger door and stood there looking up at me. When he smiled, I saw why his voice had sounded wrong. His mouth was full of ice. Not just ice, but frozen blood, tissue. Things that should have been inside a body. When he spoke, it came out in a cloud of vapor so cold it frosted the window. "Stuck?" he asked. "I can help. Let me in. So cold out here." His hand reached for the door handle. I'd locked it the second I got in, but I watched in horror as frost spread across the door, and I heard the lock mechanism begin to freeze, crackling as ice formed inside it. In seconds, it would be frozen solid, useless. He'd be able to open it with a hard pull. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the shifter and started rocking the rig, forward and back, trying to break the wheels free from the snow. The engine roared, transmission screaming in protest. "Don't be rude," the thing outside said, its voice carrying easily over the engine noise. "I'm trying to help. It's warm in here, isn't it? In your cab, I remember warm." The frost on my window was spreading, creating patterns that looked almost deliberate. Almost like faces. I kept rocking, desperation giving me strength. Forward, back, forward, feeling the tires bite slightly, slip, bite again. The thing's hand was on the door handle now. I could see the metal starting to frost over. Then, miracle of miracles, I felt the tires catch. The rig lurched forward, and I gunned it, not caring about control, just needing distance. I shot out of that access road and onto the county highway, my trailer fishtailing wildly. I fought the wheel, got it straightened out, and kept going. In my mirror, I saw the figure standing at the edge of the road, still as a post, watching me go. Then the snow swallowed it up, and it was gone. I drove for 10 minutes before I dared to slow down, my heart hammering. Hands white-knuckled on the wheel. I should have hit that drift Torvald had warned me about, but I never saw it. Maybe the plow crew had already cleared it. Maybe it was never there. Maybe Torvald wasn't there either. I drove until I found an open truck stop outside of Duluth, pulled in, and just sat there shaking. It was past midnight, and the place was nearly empty. I went inside, got coffee, tried to process what had happened. The waitress, a woman named Eulalie Pritchard according to her name tag, took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I must have looked bad because she brought me a blanket and told me to sit by the heater. "You look hypothermic," she said. She had a nurse's directness, that way of assessing someone in seconds. "When's the last time you were warm?" "I don't know," I admitted. She frowned. "I'm going to take your temperature." She came back with a thermometer, one of those forehead ones. She held it up, and her frown deepened. "This can't be right. Says you're 94 degrees. You should be in the hospital." But I didn't feel cold anymore. Actually, I felt fine. Better than fine. The shaking had stopped, and the coffee tasted incredible. Each sip warming me from the inside. "I feel okay," I told her. She didn't look convinced, but didn't push it. As I sat there, I started to wonder if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Hypothermia can cause confusion, hallucinations. Maybe there was no ranger station, no figure, no frozen horror wearing a man's skin. Maybe I'd been starting to freeze, and my brain had conjured the whole thing. But when I went back to my rig, I saw it. On my passenger side door, still visible despite the falling snow, was a handprint. But it wasn't like a normal handprint. It was raised, like something had pressed against the metal and left a layer of ice that wouldn't melt. and in the center of the palm, frozen into the ice, was a small metal pin. I pried it free carefully. It was an old park ranger badge, the kind they stopped making in the 70s. The name on it was too corroded to read. I reported the abandoned ranger station to the county the next day. They told me there were no Forest Service access roads on the route I'd described, and certainly no ranger stations. The area I claimed to have been in was private timberland, had been for 50 years. No structures, no roads. I tried to tell them what I'd seen, but the words died in my throat. How do you explain something like that? How do you make someone believe that you met something wearing a dead man's skin, something that wanted to warm itself with your heat, your life? I still have the badge. I've looked into it, tried to find records. There was a ranger station in that area, but it burned down in 1973. The ranger on duty, a man named Olson, died in the fire. They said he was trapped inside, that the doors froze shut in the cold. They found him by the heater, or what was left of him. I don't run the Iron Range routes anymore. I turn down loads that go anywhere near Virginia, Ely, or any of those towns that sit in the shadow of Superior's lake effect snow. When other drivers talk about the weird things they've seen on winter roads, I don't join in. I just listen and nod and keep my experiences to myself. But sometimes, on the coldest nights, I feel it. A slight chill on my right side, like someone standing just outside my passenger door, waiting. And when I look, there's frost on the window that wasn't there a second ago. Patterns in the ice that might be random, or might be a face pressed against the glass from the outside, looking for a way in. I keep driving, I keep moving, because the one thing I learned that night is that some cold goes deeper than weather. Some cold gets inside you and never quite leaves. And if you stop moving, if you let yourself freeze even for a moment, that's when it catches up. That's when it finds a way in. The badge is in a box in my apartment, wrapped in cloth I never touch with bare hands. Sometimes, on the worst nights, I swear I can hear it humming. US 18 doesn't get the respect it deserves. Everyone talks about I-80, I-90, the big interstates that cut across the Midwest, but Route 18 is the one you take when you need to avoid the main arteries. It runs along the Iowa-Wisconsin border, through small towns that time forgot, across bridges that span rivers you've never heard of. I've run it dozens of times, hauling agricultural equipment mostly, combines and tractors that don't fit under the interstate clearances. It's a good road, usually, but in February of 2020, it became something else entirely. My name's Cyrus Murdoch, and I've been driving for 15 years. I'm careful, methodical, the kind of driver who checks his load 3 times before rolling out, who keeps maintenance records in a binder, who's never missed a delivery deadline. But that week in February, careful didn't matter. The storm that rolled through the border region wasn't the biggest I'd ever seen, but it was the most vindictive. It came in waves, dumping snow, then freezing rain, then more snow. The roads became sheets of ice with a coating of powder, and the bridges, God, the bridges became death traps. I was hauling a partial load, which in retrospect probably saved my life. A full 53 feet would have been too much weight on those ice-slicked bridges. As it was, I had maybe 20,000 pounds of seed drills and cultivator parts heading to a co-op in Prairie du Chien. The storm hit harder than forecasted, and by the time I crossed into Wisconsin, I was already regretting not staying put in Decorah. But the delivery was time-sensitive. The farmer needed this equipment for spring planting, and I'd made a commitment. So I pushed on, wipers working overtime, heater blasting, every muscle tense as I navigated the increasingly treacherous road. The first bridge closure sign appeared around 3 p.m. Little Turkey River Bridge closed due to ice. There was a detour marker, but the arrow pointed down a county road that looked barely wide enough for a pickup, let alone a semi. I grabbed my atlas and tried to find an alternate route. That's when I realized just how trapped I was. The main highway back was already closed behind me. I'd heard it on the CB, and the roads ahead were a maze of small bridges, any one of which could be closed. I was committed now, whether I liked it or not. I took the detour, holding my breath as my trailer cleared the narrow road by inches, tree branches scraping the sides. After 20 minutes of white-knuckle driving, I rejoined US 18, only to find another closure sign 2 miles later. Yellow River Bridge closed. Ice accumulation. This detour took me south, deeper into Iowa, on roads that weren't even marked on my GPS. I was navigating by feel and road signs, trying to keep heading generally east, hoping to find a route that would eventually get me back to 18 or to Prairie du Chien. The snow was falling harder now, and visibility was down to maybe 100 feet. That's when I saw the diner. It appeared out of the white, like a mirage. A small, old-fashioned building with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that said Winnie's. The lot was empty, except for an old Chevy pickup and a county sheriff's cruiser. I pulled in, grateful for a chance to get my bearings, warm up, and maybe get some local knowledge about the road conditions. The diner's interior was stuck in about 1965 and hadn't seen a reason to change. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a long counter with chrome stools. It was warm, almost too warm, and the smell of coffee and bacon grease was heavenly after hours in the cold. There were only 2 other people inside. A woman behind the counter, late 60s, with iron-gray hair and a face that had seen every kind of weather the Midwest could throw at it, and a deputy sheriff sitting at the counter nursing a cup of coffee. They both looked up when I walked in, and something passed between them. A look I couldn't quite read. "Afternoon," the woman said. "You look half frozen. Coffee?" "Please," I said, taking a stool 2 down from the deputy. She poured a cup and slid it over. "I'm Winnie Calhoun. This is my place. You're not local." It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am. I'm trying to get to Prairie du Chien, but the bridges keep closing. I've detoured twice already, and I'm not even sure where I am anymore." She and the deputy exchanged another look. "You're about 10 miles southwest of Ossian," the deputy said. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of face that still showed surprise at the things the job showed him. "I'm Alton Reeb, county deputy, and I'm afraid I've got bad news. They just closed the last bridge on 18. Ice is too bad. You're not getting to Prairie du Chien tonight, maybe not tomorrow either." I felt my stomach drop. "What about alternate routes? There's got to be something." Winnie shook her head. "Not with a rig that size. The county roads around here weren't built for semis. You'd get stuck or worse." She refilled my coffee without asking. "You're welcome to wait it out here. I've got food, coffee, and heat. Can't offer much else." I looked out the window at the snow, coming down even harder now. My rig sat in the lot, already accumulating a fresh coating of white. "How long do storms like this usually last?" "This one?" Alton said. "Could be hours, could be days. The ice is the problem. Even after the snow stops, those bridges won't be safe until crews can treat them, and the crews are overwhelmed right now. 3 counties worth of roads to clear, and this one's low priority." I resigned myself to waiting and ordered some food. As I ate, a burger that was better than it had any right to be, I tried to make conversation. "You see a lot of stranded drivers in storms like this?" Winnie wiped down the counter, her movements practiced, automatic. "Some. Most are smart enough to stop before they get stuck out here. You're the first semi I've seen in days, though. Trucks usually know better." There was something in her tone, not quite accusatory, but close, like I'd broken some unspoken rule by being here. Alton seemed to pick up on it too because he cleared his throat. "You said you detoured twice?" I nodded. Little Turkey River, then Yellow River. Something flickered in Alton's eyes. When did you hit Yellow River? About an hour ago, maybe less. Why? He pulled out his radio and keyed it up. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Can you confirm status on Yellow River Bridge? Static, then a woman's voice. Unit 7, Yellow River Bridge is open. I repeat, open. Ice cleared as of 1400 hours. Alton looked at me. What did the sign say exactly? I tried to remember. Bridge closed due to ice accumulation. There was a detour arrow. Alton stood up, his hand dropping to his service weapon in that automatic way cops have when something doesn't feel right. There's no closure on Yellow River. Hasn't been all day. And we don't use accumulation on our signs. They just say bridge closed or bridge iced. The diner suddenly felt too warm. Are you saying someone put up a fake sign? I'm saying something's not right, Alton said. He looked at Winnie. You got your shotgun behind the counter? She nodded, her face gone hard. Same as always. I didn't understand what was happening, but I could feel the temperature in the room changing, tension replacing the earlier warmth. What's going on? I asked. Alton didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, This detour you took, did you see anyone else? Any other vehicles, any houses, anything? I thought back. No, nothing, just trees and snow and road. He swore softly. And you ended up here, at Winnie's. Is that a problem? Winnie answered, her voice tight. It's a problem because Winnie's isn't on any detour route from Yellow River. To get here from there, you'd have to know these roads. You'd have to be trying to find this place. The implications of what she was saying hit me slowly, like cold water seeping through clothes. You're saying someone guided me here. Someone wanted me at this diner. Alton moved to the window looking out at the parking lot. How much fuel you got? The question seemed random, but I answered. 3/4 of a tank. Maybe 400 miles worth. Phone? Dead. Tried to charge it in the cab, but the charger port's been acting up. Alton nodded like this confirmed something. They've been doing this for 3 weeks now. Fake signs, bad detours, leading people to isolated spots. Sometimes it's a closed diner, sometimes an empty gas station. One trucker ended up at an abandoned way station. The pattern's always the same. Driver gets turned around, ends up somewhere isolated, and then he trailed off. Then what? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Winnie spoke up. Then they wait, they watch, and when you're vulnerable, low on fuel, phone dead, no idea where you are, they make their move. Who's they? The word had barely left my mouth when the lights went out. Not flickering, not a power failure, just instantly dark. The only light came from the gray snow glow through the windows. Alton drew his weapon, and I heard Winnie moving behind the counter. The unmistakable sound of a shotgun being racked. Stay low, Alton whispered, away from the windows. I dropped behind the counter, my heart hammering. What's happening? They cut the power, Winnie said. She was crouched next to me, the shotgun steady in her hands. Means they're here. Means they've decided it's time. Through the window, I could see my rig, and beyond it, emerging from the tree line, shapes. Human-shaped, but moving wrong, too smooth, too coordinated. There were 5 of them, spread out, approaching the diner from different angles. Alton fired a shot through the window, the sound deafening in the small space. One of the shapes dropped, but the others kept coming. They're not stopping, he said, more to himself than us. He fired again, and again. 2 more shapes went down, but they got back up. Just stood up like the bullets had done nothing. That's when I understood. These weren't people. or they weren't anymore. "The back door," Winnie said urgently. "Out through the kitchen. There's a root cellar, old storm shelter. They might not know about it." We moved, half crawling, as something hit the front door hard enough to shake the frame. Alton covered us, firing methodically, buying seconds we desperately needed. The kitchen was dark, but Winnie moved through it with the confidence of someone who'd worked there for decades. She yanked open a floor hatch I never would have seen, revealing a ladder leading down into darkness. "Go," she said to me. "Now." I didn't argue. I went down the ladder, my hands shaking on the rungs. Winnie followed, and then Alton, still facing backward, his gun trained on the kitchen door. He pulled the hatch closed just as I heard the front door splinter. The cellar was small, maybe 8 by 10, with shelves of canned goods and a smell of earth and old vegetables. Winnie had a flashlight and she clicked it on, the beam revealing our faces, all of us breathing hard. "How long can we stay here?" I asked. "As long as we need to," she said, but her voice wasn't convincing. We could hear movement above us, footsteps crossing the diner floor, methodical, searching. Then they stopped, right above us. We held our breath, and I swear I could hear breathing through the floorboards. Not human breathing. Too steady, too synchronized, like multiple sets of lungs moving as one. Then a voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere seemed to seep through the walls. "We know you're here." It was a man's voice, pleasant, conversational. "Come out, we just want to help. It's cold out there. You need somewhere safe." Alton raised his gun toward the hatch, and Winnie put a hand on his arm, shaking her head. The voice continued. "We've been watching you, Cyrus, watched you ignore the warnings, watched you take the detours. You came to us so willingly." It knew my name. "How many others?" I whispered. "How many other drivers?" Winnie's face was grim in the flashlight beam. "We're not sure. At least a dozen in the last month. Some got away. Some—" She didn't finish, didn't need to. The footsteps started again, moving away from our position toward the back of the building. We heard doors opening, the crash of furniture being overturned. They were searching, thorough and patient. Alton checked his magazine. "I've got 6 rounds left," he whispered. "Winnie?" 4 shells. They looked at me, and I realized they were calculating odds, figuring out how to make a last stand count. "There's got to be another way," I said. "A way out of this cellar, something." Winnie thought for a moment. "There's an old coal chute, hasn't been used in 40 years, opens to the outside, but it's small." "How small?" "You might fit. Me, maybe. Alton's too broad in the shoulders." Alton didn't argue, just nodded. "Where does it come out?" "Side of the building, faces the woods. If you can get to it without them seeing, you might make the tree line." I looked at him. "I'm not leaving you here." "You're not leaving me. You're going for help. You get to your rig, you drive until you get the cell signal, you call this in with everything you've got. State police, feds, I don't care. You tell them what's happening here." The footsteps above us stopped again. Silence, heavy and expectant. Then the voice returned, closer now, like whoever it was had put their mouth right against the floorboards. "Cyrus, your truck's lovely. We've been admiring it. But the fuel line's awfully exposed. Would be a shame if something happened to it. If you were stuck here with us." Panic surged through me. Without my rig, I had nothing. No escape, no shelter, no way to call for help once I got out of range of whatever was jamming signals here. Winnie grabbed my arm. "Now, the coal chute's in the far corner. You've got maybe 30 seconds before they realize we're not coming up." I moved, crawling across the dirt floor to where she pointed. There it was, a small metal chute, angled up toward the surface. I pushed on it, and the hatch gave way, rusted hinges screaming. Snow fell through the opening, and I could see gray daylight. I looked back at Winnie and Alton. "I'll come back. I'll bring help." "I know you will," Alton said, though his eyes said he knew different. "Now go." I squeezed through the chute, my shoulders scraping metal, pulling myself up and out into the snow. I emerged on the side of the building, just as Winnie had said, facing the woods. I could see my rig in the front lot, untouched so far, and I could see them. 3 figures standing by the diner's front door, backs to me. I had maybe 10 seconds before they turned. I ran, not toward my rig, that was suicide. Into the woods, deep and fast, branches whipping my face, snow soaking through my jeans. Behind me, I heard shouts, not words but sounds, inhuman and full of rage. I didn't look back. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. When I finally stopped, bent over, gasping, I realized I was lost. Completely, utterly lost in a forest I didn't know, in a storm that showed no signs of stopping. But I was alive, and I still had a chance. I walked for what felt like hours but was probably less than 1, trying to keep heading in one direction, using the wind as a guide. The cold was seeping in now, my wet clothes working against me. I was starting to feel the first signs of hypothermia. The shivering, the confusion, the overwhelming urge to just sit down in the snow and rest. That's when I saw the road. A real road, plowed recently with tire tracks still visible. I stumbled onto it and started following the tracks. After maybe a mile, I saw lights. A gas station, open with cars at the pumps. I nearly cried with relief. Inside, I used the payphone, remember those? To call 911. Told them everything. The diner, the fake signs, Winnie and Alton, the things pretending to be human. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, but she sent units. I waited there, drinking coffee I couldn't taste, wrapped in a blanket the attendant gave me. The state police arrived an hour later. They took my statement, drove me back toward where I thought the diner was. But we couldn't find it. The roads I'd taken didn't exist on any map, and where the diner should have been there was just forest. Deep, unbroken forest that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. They searched for 3 days, found no diner, no root cellar, no Winnie Calhoun or Alton Reeb. The county had no record of a deputy by that name. And when I finally found my rig, it was parked at a truck stop outside Prairie du Chien. The delivery had been made, papers signed, load unloaded. But I have no memory of doing it. My logbook shows a gap of 18 hours. 18 hours I can't account for. The only proof I have that any of it happened is the dirt under my fingernails from the root cellar and a business card in my pocket. Handwritten, in an old-fashioned script. Winnie's Diner. Good food, good company. Open when you need us. I don't run the border routes anymore. Don't take US 18, don't trust detour signs, don't stop at diners I haven't researched thoroughly. And when other drivers talk about getting turned around in storms, about roads that shouldn't exist, and places that appear out of nowhere, I listen. I listen, and I wonder how many of them found what I found. How many made it out. And how many are still there, in that cellar or places like it, waiting for someone to believe their story enough to come looking. The card's in my wallet still. Sometimes, late at night, I take it out and look at it. The writing's faded now, but it's still legible. And on the back, in different handwriting, a message I didn't notice before. You were lucky, Cyrus. Most don't leave. But we'll see you again. The roads always loop back. I hope to God that's not true, but I check my mirrors more than I used to, and I never, ever follow a detour without confirming it first. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan isn't technically Midwest by some definitions, but it might as well be. It's got the same brutal winters, the same endless stretches of nothing, the same way of making you feel small and insignificant against forces you can't control. I've been running loads up there for 9 years, mostly lumber and paper products out of the mills. It's good money, steady work, and the routes are predictable. Or they were, until December 2016, when I learned that predictability means nothing when the lake decides to remind you who's really in charge. My name's Ephraim Daltrey, and I've been trucking since I was 23. I'm methodical by nature, the kind of driver who plans routes 3 days in advance, who knows every rest stop and every diesel station between here and wherever. I don't take unnecessary risks, don't push my hours, don't ignore weather warnings, which is why what happened that week makes no sense. I did everything right, followed every protocol, made every smart decision. And I still ended up in a situation that had no rational explanation, no logical resolution. I'm still trying to make sense of it. The load was simple enough. 40,000 pounds of finished lumber heading from a mill outside of Marquette to a distribution center in Green Bay. The route would take me south along US 41, then west across the Mackinac Bridge, then down through Wisconsin. Total trip time, maybe 8 hours if the roads were good. The forecast was concerning, but not alarming. Lake effect snow warnings, which is standard for December in the UP. The snow comes off Lake Superior in bands, can dump 3 feet in specific locations while areas 10 miles away stay dry. You learn to read the radar, learn to time your runs between the bands. I'd done it 100 times. I left Marquette around noon, and the first couple hours were fine. Light snow, roads were clear enough, traffic was moving. I was making good time, ahead of schedule even. Around 3 p.m., I stopped at a small station outside of Negaunee to fuel up and grab coffee. The attendant, a woman named Mavis Ellery, was manning the counter alone. She looked to be in her 70s, the kind of person who'd probably been working there since the place opened, who knew every regular customer by name and every road condition by instinct. When I came in to pay, she was listening to a weather radio, and her face was creased with worry. "You heading south?" she asked. I nodded. "Planning to make the bridge before dark." She shook her head. "I'd hold up if I were you. That lake effect band is intensifying. They're talking about closing US 41 from here to Lens. Could be shut down for 12 hours or more." I pulled up the weather radar on my phone. She was right. A massive band of snow was forming right over Lake Superior, and it was tracking east. If I left now, I might stay ahead of it. If I waited, I'd be stuck for half a day. "I appreciate the warning," I said, "but I think I can beat it." Mavis gave me a long look, the kind that said she'd seen this before, seen drivers make this exact calculation, and knew how it usually turned out. "Your choice," she said. "But if you get stuck, call for help early. Don't wait until it's too late." I should have listened to her. Should have trusted that instinct, that local knowledge that comes from living in a place for decades. But I was thinking about the delivery deadline, about keeping my on-time record perfect, about not wanting to lose a day sitting in a truck stop. So I thanked her, climbed back in my rig, and rolled out. The snow started 15 minutes later. Not gradually, not with warning flurries. It just started, like someone flipped a switch. 1 minute the road was visible, the next I was driving through a wall of white. Lake effect snow is different from normal snowfall. It's heavier, wetter, and it comes down so hard your wipers can barely keep up. I slowed to 40, then 30, 4 ways on, following the faint outline of the shoulder. The world had shrunk to maybe 20 feet in front of my bumper, and I was navigating more by feel than sight. Then I saw the closure sign. Emergency barricades across both lanes. Orange lights flashing. Road closed ahead. No exceptions. I brought the rig to a stop and checked my GPS. According to the map, I was still 30 miles from Léans, which meant they'd extended the closure further than originally announced. My phone showed 1 bar of signal. I called dispatch, reported the situation, asked for guidance. The dispatcher told me to find a safe place to park and wait it out. There was a maintenance yard about 5 miles back, he said, with a turnaround large enough for semis. I should backtrack and hole up there until the road reopened. I started to reverse carefully, watching my mirrors. The road behind me looked clear enough. No traffic, no obstacles. I'd gone maybe a quarter mile when I felt the shoulder give way. Not dramatically, not a collapse, just a soft, sinking sensation. My trailer tires were off the pavement, sinking into snow that was deeper than it looked. I tried to pull forward, but the drive wheels just spun. I was stuck, half on the road, half off, with no cell signal and no way to call for help. Perfect. I grabbed my CB and keyed up. This is eastbound on US 41, about 25 miles north of Léans. I'm stuck in the shoulder, need a pull. Anyone copy? Static. I tried again, switching channels. Nothing. The storm was blocking everything. I sat there for a moment, assessing options. I could try to dig out, but without chains or sand, I was just spinning wheels. I could wait for a plow to come through, but given the closure, that might be hours. Or I could walk back to that maintenance yard, see if anyone was there, call for help from a landline. It was 5 miles, but I had good winter gear, and the snow, while heavy, wasn't impossible to walk through. I made the decision. I'd walk back, get help, come back with a wrecker. I grabbed my parka, gloves, flashlight, and a road flare just in case, and started walking. The snow was immediately worse than I expected. Not just falling, but swirling, driven by wind that seemed to come from every direction at once. I kept my head down, following the shoulder, using my flashlight to stay oriented. After about a mile, I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. The cold was seeping through my layers, and my face was going numb despite my hood. That's when I saw the structure ahead. Not the maintenance yard. I hadn't gone far enough for that. This was something else, a small building set back from the road, barely visible through the snow. As I got closer, I could make out details. It was a road commission building, one of those small outposts they use for storing equipment and warming up plow crews. And there was light in the windows. Someone was there. I approached the door and knocked. Heavy, desperate thumps that sounded too loud in the muffled world of the storm. The door opened immediately, and a man stood there, silhouetted against interior light. "Jesus, get in here before you freeze," he said, pulling me inside. The warmth hit me like a physical thing, and I stood there for a moment just breathing, feeling my face tingle as the blood flow returned. The man closed the door and looked me over. He was maybe 60, with a face that was all hard angles and weathered skin, wearing a road commission jacket with a name tag that said Garnet Pike. "You're the trucker," he said. It wasn't a question. "They called about you 20 minutes ago. Said you were stuck up the road." I blinked. "I don't understand. I couldn't get through on my CB. How did they—" "Plow driver saw you," Pike said. "Radioed it in. We've got a wrecker on the way, but it's going to be a couple of hours. Storm's got everything backed up." He gestured to a bench along the wall. "Sit, warm up. You walked how far?" "Maybe a mile. I was trying to get back to the maintenance yard." Pike shook his head. "Maintenance yard's closed, has been since October. Budget cuts. This is the only manned station for 15 miles. That didn't make sense. My dispatcher had specifically mentioned the maintenance yard, said it was 5 miles back. But maybe he'd been wrong, working off old information. It happened. I sat down and took off my gloves, flexing my fingers to get circulation back. The building was small, maybe 20 by 20, with a concrete floor, metal shelves full of equipment, a space heater in the corner, and a desk with a CB radio. Pike poured coffee from a thermos and handed me a cup. "Drink. You look half frozen." I took it gratefully, let the warmth seep into my hands. "I appreciate this. I thought I was going to have to walk the whole way." Pike sat at the desk, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're lucky. Most people who get stuck out there in conditions like this don't get found until spring. If ever." There was something off in the way he said it. Not threatening exactly, but matter-of-fact in a way that made me uncomfortable. "How long have you worked for the road commission?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Long time," Pike said. "Since before you were born, probably. I've seen a lot of storms, a lot of drivers who didn't respect the lake. The lake doesn't forgive mistakes." I nodded, sipping my coffee. It tasted strange, slightly bitter, but I chalked that up to being cheap commission coffee. I usually respect it. Just thought I could beat the band this time. Pike smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nobody beats the lake. The lake always wins." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind howl outside. I was starting to feel drowsy, the warmth and exhaustion catching up with me. My eyes kept wanting to close, and I had to force them open. "You should rest," Pike said. "Wrecker's going to be at least 2 hours. No point staying awake." I wanted to resist, but the drowsiness was overwhelming. I stretched out on the bench, using my folded parka as a pillow. The last thing I remember before sleep took me was Pike sitting at the desk, still watching me, and the strange thought that the radio on his desk wasn't making any sound. No static, no voices, just silence. When I woke up, something was wrong. The light was different, grayer, and the temperature had dropped significantly. I was shivering despite my layers. I sat up, confused, and looked around. Pike was gone. The space heater was off. And when I checked my watch, I saw that it was 6 a.m. I'd been asleep for over 14 hours. That wasn't possible. I couldn't have slept that long, not in these conditions, not sitting up on a hard bench. But my watch didn't lie, and the light coming through the windows was definitely dawn light, not afternoon. I stood up, my body stiff and aching, and called out, "Pike? Mr. Pike?" No response. The building was empty except for me. I walked to the door and tried to open it. Locked. Not just locked, frozen shut, ice sealing the jamb. I shoved hard, throwing my shoulder against it, and it gave way with a crack. Cold air rushed in and I stepped outside into a world transformed. The snow had stopped, and in its place was an eerie stillness. My rig was visible up the road, still stuck where I'd left it, but it was now completely buried under a drift that rose halfway up the cab. And the road was pristine, untouched by any plow, any traffic, any footprints except mine leading away from the building. I looked back at the building I'd sheltered in. In the morning light, I could see what I'd missed in the storm. The windows were boarded up, or had been. The boards had fallen away in places, revealing broken glass beneath. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and the sign, half obscured by snow, read, "Closed for demolition." "Do not enter." I felt my stomach drop. I pulled out my phone, no signal, still, but I had battery, and I opened the Notes app and started recording what I could remember. The date and time I'd entered, the conversation with Pike, the coffee, everything. Because I was starting to understand that something was very, very wrong, and I needed to document it while the memories were fresh. I started walking back toward my rig, or what I could see of it. The snow was deep, well over my knees in places, and progress was slow. I was maybe halfway there when I heard it. An engine, distant but getting closer. I turned and saw a snowplow coming up the road, its blade pushing a wall of white ahead of it. I waved my arms, and it slowed to a stop. The driver climbed down, a young guy with a face full of concern. "You the stuck trucker?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. I stopped. What was I going to say? That I'd spent 14 hours unconscious in an abandoned building with a man who might not have been real? "I've been trying to dig out," I finished lamely. The driver shook his head. "Lucky we found you. This stretch of road's been closed since yesterday afternoon. We're just now getting to clearing it. You've been out here all night?" "Yeah," I said, because what else could I say? He radioed for a wrecker and offered me a ride to the nearest open station. I accepted, climbing into the warm cab of the plow gratefully. As we passed the building I'd sheltered in, I looked at it closely. In the daylight, it was clearly abandoned, clearly had been for years. The roof was partially collapsed, the interior visible through gaps in the walls. Nobody could have been working in there. Nobody could have survived a night in there without freezing. The driver noticed me looking. "That old place. Been closed for 5-6 years now. They were supposed to tear it down, but you know how it is. Budget's always tight. Anyone ever work there? A man named Garnet Pike?" The driver frowned. "Pike? That name sounds familiar. Hold on." He grabbed his radio and called in. After a brief exchange, he turned back to me. "My supervisor says Garnet Pike was a road commissioner back in the day. Died in the 90s, I think. Got caught in a lake-effect storm while checking on a closure. They found him frozen in his truck about 2 miles from here. The implications settled over me like the snow. I'd spent the night in an abandoned building, talking to a dead man, drinking coffee that couldn't have existed. And yet I'd survived. I should have frozen, should have died of exposure or hypothermia in that unheated building. But I hadn't. I'd woken up cold but alive, functional enough to walk. The wrecker met us at my rig, and the operator, a taciturn guy who didn't waste words, got me pulled out in about 20 minutes. My truck started on the first try, no damage, no issues. It was like the whole thing had never happened. I drove to the nearest truck stop and sat there for an hour, drinking real coffee, trying to process what had happened. Finally, I called the road commission office and asked to speak to someone about the building. I described the location, described what I'd seen. The woman on the phone was confused. "Sir, that building hasn't been operational in years. If you sheltered there, you're lucky the roof didn't collapse on you. It's not safe." "I know," I said. "But I need to know about Garnet Pike. What happened to him?" She put me on hold, came back a few minutes later. "Garnet Pike died in 97. He was checking on a closure during a lake-effect storm when his truck went off the road. He tried to walk to safety, got disoriented in the whiteout. They found him 3 days later, frozen, about a quarter mile from his commission building, the building where he'd worked for 30 years. Did they say anything else about how he died? Just that he was almost home. He'd made it within sight of his building. They said if he'd gotten inside, if he'd had shelter and warmth, he would have survived. But the door was frozen shut. He died on the doorstep." I thanked her and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring out at the snow-covered lot. I thought about Pike, dying in sight of safety, freezing because he couldn't get that door open. I thought about how he'd opened the door for me, pulled me inside, given me warmth and coffee and a place to rest. How he'd told me the lake doesn't forgive mistakes. How he'd watched over me through the night in a building that should have been as cold as a tomb. I'd been saved by a ghost, by a man who'd died trying to reach the safety he'd given me. It's been years since that night, and I still run loads to the UP. Still drive US 41, still pass that abandoned building. Sometimes I slow down when I pass it, looking for signs of life, looking for lights in those boarded windows. I never see anything, it's just a derelict building, waiting for demolition that never comes. But I think about Pike sometimes, about why he helped me, why he appeared when I needed him. Maybe he's still trying to reach that door, still trying to get inside where it's warm. Maybe helping stranded drivers is his way of finishing that journey, of saving others from the fate he suffered. Or maybe I'm just trying to rationalize an experience that has no rational explanation. Either way, I don't stop at abandoned buildings anymore. Don't trust shelters that appear too conveniently in the middle of nowhere. But I also don't ignore the stories other drivers tell about strange encounters on winter roads, about people who appear out of nowhere to offer help and then vanish without explanation. Because I know now that the line between the living and the dead gets thin in the worst storms. And sometimes the dead are more helpful than the living. Last winter, I heard about a driver who got stranded on the same stretch of US 41. His story was almost identical to mine. An abandoned building, a man in a road commission jacket, coffee and warmth, and a night of sleep that shouldn't have been possible. The driver told the story at a truck stop, and most people laughed it off. But I didn't. I caught his eye across the dining area, and we shared a nod of understanding. We knew what we'd seen, what we'd experienced, and we knew better than to question it too closely. Because sometimes in the frozen heart of a Michigan winter, when the lake effect snow is coming down so hard you can't see your own hood, the dead still walk their old routes, still check on closures, still offer shelter to the stranded and lost. And if you're lucky enough to encounter them, if you're smart enough to accept their help without asking too many questions, they might just save your life, just like Garnett Pike saved mine. The Sandhills region of Nebraska is a lonely place, even in good weather. 20,000 square miles of rolling, grass-covered dunes, more cattle than people, and roads that stretch to the horizon without a curve. In winter, it becomes something else, a vast, white emptiness where the wind doesn't just blow, it hunts. It searches out every weakness, every gap in your defenses, every moment of doubt. I learned that in March of 2018, when what should have been a routine run turned into the worst night of my life. My name's Judah Merriweather, and I've been hauling cattle for 12 years. It's honest work, hard work, and it takes you to places most people never see. Remote ranches, auction yards in towns with populations under 500. Feedlots that exist as dots on maps that haven't been updated since the 70s. That night, it took me somewhere I wish I'd never been. Somewhere I'm still not entirely convinced exists on any map. I was running empty from Alliance to North Platte, deadheading back after delivering a load of Angus to a feedlot. The trailer was clean, freshly washed out at the delivery site, and I was making good time. The forecast called for light snow, maybe some wind. Nothing a driver with experience couldn't handle. But forecasts in the Sandhills are more like suggestions than predictions. The weather does what it wants out here, and what it wanted that night was to bury everything under 3 feet of snow, while winds gusting to 70 miles per hour turned the world into a white fury. I should have seen it coming. The sky had that look, a flat, oppressive gray that seems to press down on the land like a coffin lid. The kind of sky that makes cattle nervous, and horses refuse to leave their stalls, but I was tired, eager to get home to my apartment in North Platte, eager to sleep in my own bed for once instead of the cramped sleeper berth. So I convinced myself I could outrun it. I've made a lot of stupid decisions in my life, but that one ranks near the top. By the time I hit Highway 2 west of Broken Bow, I knew I'd made a mistake. The snow was coming down in sheets, and the wind was hitting my empty trailer with enough force to shove the whole rig sideways. Empty trailers are a nightmare in crosswinds. They catch the wind like a sail, and you spend more time fighting to stay in your lane than actually driving. I was down to 30 miles per hour, then 20, fighting the wheel just to keep it between the ditches. The road ahead would vanish for seconds at a time, complete whiteout, and I'd be driving on memory and hope. The center line disappeared, the shoulder markers disappeared, everything disappeared except the white and the wind. I was looking for a place to pull over, any ranch access road or wide spot where I could get off the main highway and wait it out. That's when I felt it. That terrible, unmistakable sensation every trucker dreads. The trailer started to drift. Black ice under the snow. Invisible and deadly as a knife in the dark. I felt the back end step out, swinging wide to the left. My stomach dropped, and time seemed to slow down the way it does in emergencies. I tried to correct gentle pressure on the wheel, foot off the brake, letting the Jake do the work. For a second, I thought I had it. The trailer started to come back in line, and I felt a surge of relief. Then the laws of physics took over, and relief turned to terror. The trailer continued its arc, pulling the cab with it. I was jackknifing, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I felt the whole rig start to tip. That slow-motion moment where you know what's coming but can't stop it. Time stretched out impossibly. I saw my coffee cup lift off the holder, saw my CB mic swing on its coil, saw the world outside my windshield start to rotate. The passenger side lifted, kept lifting, and then I was going over. The world rotated 90 degrees, and gravity betrayed me. I was lying on the driver's side door, held in place by my seatbelt, looking up at the passenger window like it was a skylight. The crash was less dramatic than you'd think. No explosion, no fireball like in the movies. Just a prolonged crunch and scrape as 53 feet of steel and aluminum settled onto its side in a drift of snow. The engine had died automatically, some safety feature kicking in, and the sudden silence was profound. Just wind, howling like something alive and hungry, and the creak of metal settling into its new position. I hung there for a moment, suspended by my seatbelt, taking inventory. Arms and legs responded when I told them to move. No sharp pains, no wetness that would indicate bleeding. Nothing broken, no blood, just bruised and shaken and scared out of my mind. I could smell diesel, strong and sharp, which meant a leak somewhere. Not good, but not immediately catastrophic. I needed to get out, assess the damage, call for help. I unbuckled, and gravity immediately claimed me. I fell the 2 feet to the driver's side door, landing awkwardly on my shoulder. Pain shot through my arm, but it was the dull ache of impact, not the sharp lightning of a brake. I took a moment to breathe, to let the adrenaline settle, to think clearly. The passenger door was now above me, my only exit unless I wanted to try to squeeze through the broken windshield. I stood on the driver's side window, glass crunching under my boots, and reached up to push open the passenger door. It was heavier than I expected, fighting gravity, but I managed to get it open and prop it with my shoulder while I climbed up and out. The wind hit me the moment I emerged, stealing my breath and driving snow into every gap in my clothing. I pulled myself out completely and dropped to the ground, or what I thought was the ground. My feet sank into snow up to my thighs. The visibility was maybe 10 feet on a good second, less when the wind gusted. Just enough to see my rig lying on its side like a dead animal. Trailer jackknifed at that terrible angle that tells you immediately that this isn't going to be a simple fix. The whole passenger side was exposed, scraped, and dented, and I could see diesel dripping from somewhere underneath, dark spots spreading in the white snow. I pushed through the snow to the cab, fighting for every step, and tried my phone. No signal, of course not. Out here in the sandhills, you're lucky to get a signal on a clear day when you're standing on high ground. In this storm, in this valley, forget it. The phone was just an expensive paperweight. I tried the CB next, reaching through the open passenger door to grab the mic. I keyed it up, heard the squelch, felt a moment of hope. Mayday, Mayday, this is a rolled semi on Highway 2, approximately 20 miles west of a broken bow. I need assistance, over. Static. Dead. Empty static. I tried again, switching channels, trying the emergency frequency. Nothing. The storm was eating radio signals like it was hungry for them. I was on my own, at least for now. I knew the basics of survival. Stay with the vehicle. Don't try to walk in a whiteout. Wait for help. The rig, even on its side, offered shelter. I had emergency supplies in the sleeper: blankets, water, some food, road flares. I had a half tank of fuel, which meant I could run the auxiliary heater if I could get the electrical system working. I could last until the storm broke or until help arrived. I just needed to secure the scene, make myself as visible as possible, and wait. I was climbing back up toward the passenger door, planning to grab my emergency kit, when I saw them. The tracks. They were in the snow, maybe 20 feet from my truck, leading from the tree line on the north side of the road. Boot prints. Human-sized, but spaced wrong. Too far apart, like whoever made them had an unnaturally long stride or had been running. But the tracks weren't frantic or scattered. They were methodical, purposeful, a straight line from the trees to my truck. I followed them with my eyes, my heart starting to pound for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. The tracks led right up to my passenger door, the door that had been facing up, the door I'd just climbed out of. They circled the cab once, then headed back toward the trees. Someone had been here. While I was inside, hanging in my seatbelt, taking inventory, someone had approached my overturned rig, looked in, circled it, and then left. The implications made my skin crawl beneath my layers. I looked toward the tree line, but visibility was too poor to see anything except the vague shapes of pines and the endless white beyond them. "Hello?" I shouted into the wind. "I need help. I'm stranded." My voice was snatched away by the wind, carried off into the white void. No response. Just the howl of the storm and the creak of my settling truck. I tried again, louder. "Hello? Is anyone there? I saw your tracks." Still nothing. Whoever had made those tracks had either not heard me or chose not to respond. I stood there in the snow, wind cutting through my layers, trying to decide what to do. The tracks were fresh. I could tell by the way the edges were still sharp, not yet filled in by blowing snow. They couldn't be more than a few minutes old, which meant whoever made them had approached while I was unconscious or disoriented right after the crash. They'd looked in, seen me, and then left without offering help or making their presence known. Why? The wind gusted hard, and I staggered, catching myself against the trailer. The cold was starting to seep in now, that insidious chill that starts at your extremities and works its way inward. I needed to make a decision. Get back in the cab, seal myself in as best I could, and wait for help. Or follow those tracks, see if they led to a house or ranch where I could call for assistance. The smart choice was obvious. Stay with the vehicle. That's rule 1 of winter survival. But those tracks bothered me. The spacing, the purposeful way they approached, and then retreated. The silence. Something about them felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I made my decision. I'd get back in the cab, get my emergency supplies, and make myself as secure as possible. I'd set out flares once the wind died down enough that they wouldn't immediately blow out, and I'd keep my knife close, just in case whoever made those tracks decided to come back. I was halfway back to the passenger door when I heard it. An engine. Diesel, heavy, getting closer. Relief flooded through me like warm water. Someone was coming, had seen my rig or heard my mayday somehow, was coming to help. I scrambled up onto the side of my overturned truck, waving my arms, pointing my flashlight toward the sound. Through the snow, I saw headlights, high-mounted, probably a pickup. It was moving slowly, cautiously, feeling its way through the whiteout. It pulled to a stop about 20 yards away, engine idling, lights on, but nobody got out. The pickup just sat there, exhaust puffing white clouds into the wind, headlights cutting cones through the snow. I waved again, shouting, "Hey, over here! I need help! Truck rolled over. I'm okay, but I'm stuck." Still, nobody emerged from the pickup. The engine continued its steady rumble, and I could see a shape behind the windshield. Someone in the driver's seat, but they weren't moving. I dropped back into the snow and started wading toward the pickup, every step an effort. "Hey, can you hear me? I need a pull, or at least a ride to somewhere with a phone." I got within 10 feet, close enough to make out details now. The pickup was old, maybe 70s vintage, with a grille that looked like a mouthful of broken teeth. Rust showed through the paint in places, and one headlight was dimmer than the other. The windshield was frosted over, completely opaque. Nobody could see through that. Nobody could drive with that windshield. And yet the pickup was here, idling, as if someone had just parked it. The exhaust bothered me too. It was coming out white, too white, thicker than normal exhaust should be in cold weather. It looked less like combustion products and more like steam, or breath, cold breath, condensing in the freezing air. I stopped about 5 feet from the driver's side door, sudden instinct overriding the desperate need for help. "Hello?" I called out, my voice smaller now, uncertain. "Is someone in there?" The door opened, not quickly, not like someone eager to help. It opened slowly, deliberately, with a creak of old hinges that somehow cut through the wind noise. A figure stepped out, and my first impression was of size. He was tall, well over 6 feet, dressed in a heavy rancher's coat that had seen better decades. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, and he moved with a stiffness that suggested old injuries or just the arthritis of age. He stood there, not moving closer, not speaking, just regarding me from beneath that hat brim. The silence stretched out, punctuated only by the wind and the idle of his engine. I found myself taking a step backward, though I couldn't have said why. "You need help." It wasn't a question. His voice was rough, like gravel in a can, like someone who didn't speak often and wasn't used to the feel of words. "Yes," I said, trying to sound confident, professional, like this was just a normal roadside assistance situation. "My rig rolled. I need a pull, or at least a ride to somewhere with a phone. I need to call a wrecker." He stood there, and I still couldn't see his face properly. The hat brim and the blowing snow conspired to keep it in shadow. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "North Platte," I said. "Deadheading back from Alliance." "Long way to go in this storm," he said. "Dangerous. People die out here, freeze to death, get lost. Never found until spring, if then." There was something in his tone, something flat and emotionless, that made the words feel less like concern and more like statement of fact, like he was describing something he'd witnessed many times. "I know," I said. "I made a mistake, should have pulled over earlier. But I'm okay now. If you could just give me a ride or loan me a phone, I can get this sorted out." He tilted his head slightly, a considering gesture. "I can help," he said finally. "Come with me. Get you warm. Get you somewhere safe." He gestured toward the pickup with one gloved hand. The cab was dark inside, no dome light, no dashboard glow. Just darkness. "What's your name?" I asked, stalling. not sure why I was reluctant to accept the help I desperately needed. "I'm Judah Merriweather. I haul cattle, been doing it 12 years, out of North Platte. You from around here?" He didn't answer for a moment. When he did, his voice seemed to come from a different direction, though he hadn't moved. "Clovis Bain. I ranch near here. Have for a long time. Seen a lot of storms. A lot of drivers like you, making mistakes, ending up in trouble." He took a step closer, and I took a step back automatically. "Mr. Bain," I said carefully, "I appreciate you stopping, but I think I should stay with my rig. Company policy, you know. Someone will come looking, and they'll expect to find me here." He stopped advancing, stood perfectly still, that hat brim still hiding his face. "Company policy," he repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words. "That's smart. Staying with your vehicle, that's what they tell you. But out here, in storms like this, sometimes the vehicle becomes a tomb. Sometimes staying put means freezing. Dying alone in the dark while help drives right past, can't see you through the white." He wasn't wrong. That was the nightmare scenario every winter driver feared. Getting stuck, staying put like you're supposed to, and then help never arriving. Dying of exposure while following the rules. "How far is your ranch?" I asked. "Could you make a call from there? Let dispatch know my situation." "Ranch is close," he said, gesturing vaguely east. "Close enough, and I have a phone, landline, very reliable. Not like these cell phones that don't work when you need them." A landline, old-fashioned, but dependable. That actually made sense for a remote ranch. "Okay," I said, making a decision. "But let me grab my emergency kit first. I've got some supplies in my truck and I want to set out a flare at least, mark the location." He nodded slowly. "Be quick, storm's getting worse. Don't want to be out in it longer than necessary." I turned and started back toward my overturned rig, moving as fast as the snow would allow. Behind me, I heard Clovis Bain get back in his pickup. The door closed with a solid thunk, and the engine continued its steady rumble. I climbed up to my passenger door and dropped into the cab, now lying on its side like a strange cave. My emergency kit was in the sleeper, and I grabbed it quickly. Blankets, water bottles, energy bars, road flares, first aid kit, and my good flashlight with fresh batteries. I also grabbed my logbook and my wallet, stuffing them in my coat pockets. Insurance, license, registration, all the important papers. If I was leaving my rig, even temporarily, I wanted that documentation with me. As I gathered my things, a thought occurred to me. Why hadn't Clovis Bain offered to call from his cell phone? He'd mentioned my cell phone not working, had offered a landline at his ranch, but he must have a phone of his own. Everyone did these days. Even old ranchers usually had at least a basic flip phone for emergencies. Maybe his was dead, or maybe he was old school enough not to carry one, or maybe there was another reason. I shook off the thought. I was being paranoid, letting the stress of the situation make me suspicious of someone who'd stopped to help. Clovis Bain was just an old rancher, a little odd, maybe, a little stiff in his manner, but that came with the territory. People who lived alone in isolated areas got eccentric. It was natural. I climbed back out of the cab with my emergency kit and looked toward the pickup. It was still there, still idling, exhaust still puffing those two white clouds. I could see Clovis behind the wheel now, or at least his shape, motionless, waiting. I grabbed a road flare from my kit, struck it, and planted it in the snow near my rig. The red light was immediately dimmed by the blowing snow, but it was better than nothing. At least, if a plow came through or if another driver happened by, they'd see there was a situation here. I started wading back toward the pickup, emergency kit clutched to my chest. I was maybe 10 yards from the passenger door when I noticed something that made me stop. There were no tracks around the pickup. None. My tracks led from my rig toward it. That much was clear. But there were no tracks leading to the driver's side door, no tracks indicating that Clovis had walked around his vehicle, no tire tracks showing where he'd driven from. The pickup was sitting in pristine snow, as if it had been lowered from the sky directly onto that spot. I stood there, wind howling around me, staring at the impossible absence of tracks. Then I remembered the tracks I'd seen earlier, the ones leading from the tree line to my overturned truck. The spacing had been wrong, I'd thought, too far apart. Now, looking at the pristine snow around the pickup, I understood. Those tracks hadn't been made by someone walking with a long stride. They'd been made by someone who wasn't quite walking at all, someone whose feet didn't quite touch the ground with every step. My hands tightened on my emergency kit, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. Not toward the pickup, away from it. Back to my rig, back to my overturned tomb of metal and diesel fumes, back to anything except that waiting vehicle with its opaque windshield and its too white exhaust, and its driver who cast no tracks in the snow. I started backing up, slowly, trying not to make it obvious, trying to keep the pickup in view. The passenger door opened. I hadn't seen Clovis move, hadn't seen him reach across to unlatch it, but it swung open nonetheless, revealing the dark interior. "Get in, Judah," his voice called out. And I realized with mounting horror that his lips hadn't moved. The voice wasn't coming from inside the cab. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding me like the wind. "Get in. We have a long way to go, a long way down." I dropped the emergency kit and ran. Not toward my rig. That was too far, too exposed. Toward the tree line, the same direction those impossible tracks had led. The snow grabbed at my legs like hands, trying to pull me down. But fear gave me strength. I heard the pickup's engine rev, heard the wheels spin and catch, and then I heard it moving, pursuing me. I didn't look back. Looking back would cost me seconds I didn't have. I crashed into the tree line, branches whipping my face, snow cascading from disturbed boughs. The trees were thick here, old pines that blocked some of the wind and most of the snow. I kept running, weaving between trunks, trying to put distance and obstacles between me and whatever was following. Behind me, I heard the pickup stop, heard the engine idle, heard a door open. "Judah," Clovis Bain's voice, patient, almost amused. "Where are you going? You can't survive out here, not in this cold, not in this storm. Come back, let me help you." I pressed myself against a tree trunk, trying to quiet my breathing, trying to listen over the sound of my own heartbeat. The wind was quieter here among the trees, and I could hear him moving. Not footsteps exactly, but a sound like something heavy being dragged through snow. The sound would stop, then start again. Stop, then start. He was searching, methodically, patiently, hunting. "I've helped a lot of drivers, Judah," his voice called out, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "Helped them find their way. Helped them get warm. They're all warm now. So warm they'll never be cold again. Don't you want to be warm, Judah? Don't you want to stop shivering?" I bit down on my glove to keep from responding, to keep from giving away my position. The cold was already working its way through my layers, and he was right about one thing. I couldn't survive out here indefinitely. Without shelter, without heat, I'd be hypothermic in hours, dead by morning. The dragging sound came closer, and I risked a glance around the tree. Through the gaps between pines, I saw him, Clovis Bain, moving through the forest with that same stiff gait. But now I could see why he moved that way. His legs weren't quite bending right, weren't articulating the way human joints should. He moved more like a puppet, animated by something that didn't quite understand how bodies worked. And his face, God help me, I finally saw his face. The hat had been knocked off by a low branch, and what I saw underneath made my stomach lurch. It was a face, technically. It had all the right parts in approximately the right places, but the skin was too tight, stretched over the skull like canvas over a frame. The eyes were completely white, no iris, no pupil, just blank white that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. And when he smiled, the mouth opened too wide, showing teeth that were too numerous, too sharp, set in gums that were the color of old ice. "There you are," he said, and the voice came from that impossible mouth, distorted, echoing. "Found you." I ran again, pure panic driving me now. There was no plan, no destination, just the desperate animal need to escape. I crashed through underbrush, fell, got up, kept running. Behind me, I heard him following, heard that dragging sound and something else now. Laughter. He was laughing, a sound like wind whistling through a cracked window mixed with something wet and organic. I burst out of the tree line into a small clearing, and that's when I saw it. A structure, half buried in snow. An old line shack or hunting cabin, small and weathered, but it had walls and a roof and a door. Shelter. I ran for it, praying it wasn't locked, praying it was at least partially intact. The door was stuck, swollen with moisture and age, but I hit it with my shoulder and it gave way. I tumbled inside and immediately turned to slam the door shut. Clovis Bain was standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 yards away, watching me. He didn't pursue, just stood there, that too wide smile fixed on his too tight face, and slowly raised one hand in a wave. "See you soon, Judah," his voice carried across the clearing. "Real soon. I'm patient. I can wait." Then he turned and walked back into the trees, moving with that puppet gait, and the forest swallowed him. I stood there shaking, back pressed against the door, lungs burning, mind refusing to process what I'd just seen. This couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. I was hallucinating, had to be. Hypothermia caused hallucinations. Stress caused hallucinations. Maybe I'd hit my head in the rollover, had a concussion, was lying unconscious in my cab right now, dreaming this entire nightmare. But the cold felt real. The rough wood of the door against my back felt real. The burning in my lungs and the terror in my gut felt real. I looked around the cabin, letting my eyes adjust to the dim interior. It was small, maybe 12 by 12, with a single room and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. There was a cot against one wall, a small table, a couple of shelves with canned goods covered in dust, a hunting cabin, long abandoned by the look of it, but structurally sound enough. The windows were intact, though filthy, and the door, while old, was solid wood. It was shelter. It was more than I'd had 10 minutes ago, but it was also a trap. I was locked in here with whatever Clovis Bain was circling outside. I went to the window and wiped away enough grime to see out. The clearing was empty, trees swaying in the wind, snow falling steadily. No sign of the thing that had chased me. But I knew it was out there, waiting, watching. I checked the cabin methodically, looking for anything useful. The shelves yielded cans of beans and soup, so old the labels were barely readable. Matches in a waterproof container, and a half-used bottle of kerosene for the stove. I checked the stove itself and found it clean, functional, with dried wood stacked beside it. Someone had used this place seasonally, probably hunters, and had left it ready for the next season. I could make a fire, generate heat, survive until morning. But morning was at least 12 hours away, probably more. Could I hold out that long? Could I keep whatever was out there from getting in? I started a fire in the stove, more for the psychological comfort than the immediate warmth, though that would come soon enough. As the kindling caught and the wood started to burn properly, I felt some of the terror recede. fire was primal protection, ancient defense against things that hunt in the dark. I pulled the cot to where I could see both the door and the window, positioned myself so nothing could approach without me seeing it, and tried to think rationally about my situation. I was stranded in a blizzard, miles from help. With a rolled truck, I couldn't drive. But I was alive, I had shelter, I had heat, and I had matches and wood to keep the fire going. In the morning, when the storm broke, I could make my way back to the highway. Someone would find my rig, would call it in, would send searchers if necessary. I just had to survive the night. Just had to wait out the darkness and whatever was in it. The fire crackled, wood popping and settling. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell and the world was reduced to white and black and the thin orange glow of firelight. That's when I heard the sound. A soft scraping, rhythmic, coming from the roof. Like fingernails, or something like fingernails, scratching against wood shingles. I grabbed a piece of firewood from the stack, a solid length of oak that would make a decent club, and moved to the center of the room where I could watch all directions. The scraping continued, moved across the roof from one side to the other, then stopped. Silence except for the fire and the wind. Then a new sound. Tapping on the window, gentle, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap. I looked at the filthy glass and saw nothing but darkness and the reflection of firelight. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, more insistent. I approached the window slowly, club raised, and wiped away more grime. Pressed against the glass from outside was a hand. Palm flat, fingers spread, pale as snow. But wrong. The fingers were too long, the joints bent at angles that weren't quite natural. As I watched, the hand slid down the glass, leaving a smear that wasn't quite water and wasn't quite ice. Judah, the voice came through the glass, muffled but recognizable. Clovis Bain. Let me in. I just want to help. Want to get you warm. Don't you trust me, Judah? Go away, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Leave me alone. The hand disappeared from the window, and for a moment I thought he'd actually listened. Then I heard footsteps on the porch, heavy and deliberate. The door rattled in its frame as something tested it. I'd wedged it shut with a chair, but that wouldn't hold against a determined assault. Judah, the voice came again, right outside the door now. This is foolish. You'll freeze in there eventually. Fire will go out, wood will run out, cold will come in, but I can take you somewhere warm, somewhere you'll never be cold again. Don't you want that? I don't know what you are, I said, backing toward the stove, toward the light and heat. But I know you're not human. I know you're not Clovis Bain, so no, I don't want your help. There was silence for a long moment. Then I heard something that chilled me more than any of the rest had. Children's voices. Multiple children giggling and whispering coming from all sides of the cabin. Come out, come out. Play with us. It's so cold out here. We just want to be warm. I knew with absolute certainty that there were no children out there. Whatever those voices belonged to had never been children, had possibly never been anything that walked on two legs and drew breath. They were lures, bait, designed to appeal to basic human compassion and draw me out. I stayed silent, club gripped tight, watching the door and windows. The children's voices continued, rising and falling, sometimes in unison, sometimes overlapping, creating a discordant chorus that made my skin crawl. Then Clovis Bain's voice cut through them. Last chance, Judah. Come with us now, willingly, or we'll wait until you have no choice, until the cold makes you desperate, until you're so hypothermic you'll do anything for warmth. We're very patient. We've been waiting a long time. What's one more night? The sounds stopped, all of them, simultaneously. The scratching, the tapping, the voices. Just the wind and the fire, and my own ragged breathing. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, waiting for them to return. They didn't. The night stretched out, and I fed the fire, kept it burning, kept my vigil. I didn't dare sleep. Didn't dare let my guard down. Every creak of the cabin settling, every gust of wind, every pop of the fire made me jump. But nothing came. No more voices, no more scraping, no more hands pressed against the glass. Had they given up? Or were they just waiting, out there in the dark, patient as promised? As the hours crawled by and adrenaline faded, exhaustion started to creep in. The warmth from the stove was making me drowsy, and I had to fight to keep my eyes open. I knew that falling asleep could be fatal, could leave me vulnerable. But I was so tired, so very tired. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke with a start to find the fire had burned down to coals and the cabin was significantly colder. According to my watch, it was 4 a.m. I'd been out for maybe 2 hours. I immediately checked the door and windows. Everything was still secure. Outside, I could see the first hints of pre-dawn gray. The storm had passed, and in its wake was an eerie stillness. I fed the fire, building it back up, and allowed myself a moment of relief. I'd made it through the night. Whatever those things were, they hadn't gotten in. As proper dawn broke, I gathered what I could from the cabin. The matches, some of the canned food, an old coat that had been hanging on a peg. Then I carefully opened the door and looked out. The clearing was empty. Pristine snow covered everything, unmarked except by my own tracks from the night before, leading from the tree line to the cabin door. No other tracks. No sign that anything had been circling the cabin, scratching at the roof, tapping at windows. It was as if I'd imagined the whole thing, but I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. I had the memories too vivid, too detailed, too terrifying to be hallucination. And there, in the snow near the porch, was evidence. The handprint from the window had dripped down and frozen in the snow below. Not water, not ice, but something in between. Something organic. I didn't investigate it closely. I just turned away and started walking back toward where I thought the highway was. The sun was up now, weak winter sun that provided light if not warmth, and I could see farther. My rig should be visible from here with its bright paint and the flare I'd set. I walked for 20 minutes before I saw it. My overturned truck still lying where I'd left it, red flare long since burned out. And beside it, tracks. Fresh tracks, tire prints in the snow. A vehicle had stopped there recently. I approached cautiously, but the vehicle was gone now. What remained was a small orange flag planted in the snow, the kind DOT uses to mark hazards, and a business card tucked under a rock. I picked up the card with shaking hands. It was for a wrecker service out of Broken Bow. On the back, written in pen, was a message. Found your rig at dawn. Called it in. Help is on the way. If you're reading this, find the highway and head east. Plow crews are working the road. Stay safe. Fenwick Hale Wrecker Service. I nearly cried with relief. Someone had found my rig, had called for help, had given me instructions. I was going to make it. I just had to reach the highway, flag down a plow, and this nightmare would be over. I started walking east, following the direction indicated on the card. Within half an hour, I heard the diesel rumble of heavy equipment and saw a snowplow working the road. I waved my arms, and it stopped. The operator leaning out with concern on his face. "You the stuck trucker?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and my voice cracked with emotion and exhaustion. "Yeah, that's me." He got me into the warm cab of the plow, radioed for an ambulance, wrapped me in blankets. "You're lucky," he said. "Temp got down to 20 below last night. You been out here all night?" "I found shelter," I said. "An old cabin in the woods." He frowned. "Cabin? There's no cabins in this area. It's all state land, no structures allowed." I started to argue, to insist I'd just been there, had spent the night there, but he was already moving on, calling in my rescue, coordinating the wrecker. Maybe I'd been confused about the location. Maybe the cabin was farther than I thought. Or maybe, and this thought settled cold in my stomach, maybe there never was a cabin. Maybe I'd spent the night somewhere else, somewhere that only appears to those who need it, those who are desperate and lost and pursued by things that shouldn't exist. They got me to a hospital, treated me for minor frostbite and exposure, kept me for observation. The wrecker service, Fenwick Hale's outfit, recovered my rig and hauled it to a repair facility. The damage was extensive, but fixable. My company was understanding, thankful I'd survived. A deputy sheriff came to take a statement, and I told him most of it. The rollover, getting stuck, seeing the pickup, running into the woods. I left out the parts about Clovis Bain's face, about the children's voices, about the things that circled the cabin all night. He listened politely, wrote it all down. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You mentioned a pickup, an old one? 70s vintage?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" He pulled out a folder and showed me a photograph. My blood turned cold. It was Clovis Bain's pickup, exactly as I'd seen it, down to the rusty patches and the broken-tooth grill. "Is this what you saw?" "Yes," I whispered. "Who? What is it?" The deputy put the photo away. That truck belonged to a rancher named Clovis Bain. He died in 1983. Got caught in a blizzard on Highway 2, tried to drive home. His truck went off the road about 2 miles from his ranch house. He tried to walk the rest of the way but got disoriented in the whiteout. They found him 3 days after the storm cleared, frozen solid, about halfway between his truck and his house. He was still walking when he died, apparently, frozen mid-stride. How is that possible? Happens sometimes in extreme cold. Body freezes so fast it holds its shape. He looked at me directly. But here's the thing. In the 30-some years since, there have been reports. Drivers getting stuck in storms on that stretch of highway. Some of them report seeing an old pickup, a man offering a ride. Most refuse. A few accept. What happens to the ones who accept? His face darkened. We find them eventually. Sometimes days later, sometimes weeks. Always frozen, always miles from where they were last seen. Like they wandered off into the storm following someone. One driver we found had walked 12 miles in the wrong direction, directly into the sandhills before he froze. There are no roads that way, no reason to go that direction, but his tracks showed he was following something, following parallel tracks that didn't look quite right. I felt sick. Why didn't you warn me? Put up signs? We tried. We put out advisories every winter. Stay with your vehicle. Don't accept rides from strangers, but how do you tell people not to get in a truck with a dead man? Who believes that? He stood to leave, then paused. You did the right thing, Mr. Merriweather. Running. Following your instincts. A lot of drivers don't. They're tired, cold, desperate. They get in the truck because it's there, because it offers warmth. And then they're never seen alive again. After he left, I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about Clovis Bain, frozen mid-stride, trying to reach home. Thought about how he was still trying, decades later, still offering rides, still promising warmth. But the warmth he offered wasn't life. It was the final warmth of freezing to death. That paradoxical sensation hypothermia victims report right before the end, where they feel hot and start removing clothes. He was trying to take people with him, trying to share that final, fatal warmth. I was released 2 days later. My rig was repaired, and I faced a choice. Quit trucking, find a job that didn't involve winter driving through the sandhills, or get back behind the wheel. I chose to keep driving. But I made changes. Better emergency gear, satellite phone with reliable coverage, extra fuel for the heater, and I made rules. If I get stranded, I stay with my rig, period. No exceptions. I don't accept rides from strangers no matter how desperate I am. I don't follow tracks into the woods. I don't trust old pickups with frosted windshields that appear out of nowhere in storms. It's been 6 years since that night, and I still run freight through Nebraska. I see that stretch of Highway 2 sometimes, and I always feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Because I know what's out there. I know that in the worst storms, when the snow falls so thick you can't see your hood, and the wind howls like something dying, Clovis Bain is still driving his route, still stopping for stranded truckers, still offering rides to somewhere warm. And I know that every few years, some desperate driver accepts that ride, climbs into that truck with its dark interior and its driver who doesn't quite move right, and they're never seen alive again. Sometimes I see the pickup in my mirrors, far behind, pacing me on empty stretches of highway during winter storms. I drive faster when I see it, keep my doors locked, and I pray I never break down again on Highway 2 during a blizzard. Because I know he's waiting, patient as the cold, hungry as the wind, offering warmth that burns like ice and promises that end in frozen silence. Last month, another trucker disappeared on that same stretch. They found his rig 3 days later, rolled in the ditch, driver's door open. No sign of him except tracks leading away from the truck. Tracks that stopped after 50 yards, like he'd simply vanished mid-stride, or climbed into a vehicle that left no tracks of its own. They're still searching, but I know they won't find him. Not alive. When they do find him, he'll be miles from his truck, frozen, that last paradoxical warmth still evident on his face. They'll wonder why he wandered so far in the wrong direction. They'll never understand that he didn't wander. He was following Clovis Bain's last ride home. I hope to God I never have to follow it myself. But out there in the sandhills, in the white hell of a blizzard, hope is a thin and fragile thing, and the dead drive their routes forever.